you're not hearing, so something's. Hey, hi everyone. Hello. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up? Yeah, good. Um, welcome to Portrait of the Artist, 20 Years of Painting with Hasler. Before we get started this evening, I just have a couple things that I want to share. My remarks are unusually long-ish tonight, so just bear with me for a couple moments while we jump into this together. First, it's been a pretty painful week. I know that that's been true for myself and many of my colleagues here at Concord Art. For a lot of us, the feelings, well, for me in particular, the feelings brought up witnessing the war that's being waged on the Ukrainian people has felt devastatingly familiar, and it feels strange to carry on with day-to-day life, but I know that during troubled times, one of the best things that we can do is come together in community. And I'm very thankful to all of you for showing up tonight to be in community together, despite our pain and our worry, so that we can be together in this small virtual way. I'm also very thankful to Haley. It has been a real joy getting to know Haley from afar through emails and phone calls. When Kate James, our director, first suggested that we reach out to Haley Hasler and see what she's up to and if she wants to jump in with us again, she said that Haley is incredibly kind and warm and hilarious. And I found all of that to be true. And I'm glad to have her here tonight to share her work. I think of all the artists that we might have had the honor of hosting. I'm glad that this week and that tonight we're digging into Haley's work because it has always left me feeling thoughtful and tender and inspires us as viewers to hold complexity. So now for a more formal introduction. Haley is a Colorado-based artist. She lived in Boston for many years, or in the area. And her work is shown nationally and internationally. She's represented by Alpha Gallery here in Boston. She is a longtime friend of Concord Art. Her work was shown in Site Specific in 2013, curated by George Nick, and in Her Own Image in 2018, curated by Amy Sidursky. If you like what you see and you hear tonight, you might consider studying with Haley in her upcoming online workshop, which is focused on painting self-portraiture within still life. So thank you sincerely to all of you again for joining us. It feels lovely to be in community with you, even if it is online still. It's something, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Haley Hasler.
Hello. Thank you very much, Marissa. I am so pleased to be doing something with Concord Art. I'm out here in Colorado, but I feel like my people are in New England and all over the world, but this is a great way of connecting with everybody. Bear with me, I've not done a Zoom only lecture ever. I usually have people to respond to. So I'm actually looking out at my backyard here while I talk. So I hope I can still amuse and entertain you.
Do we want to start the presentation?
Let's start the presentation. I do have some tech help here from my friend Abdulaziz, which I don't think I could do this without him. Here we go. Okay. So I was born and raised in Colorado, and as an aspiring young artist, I left my hometown and have lived in many places before returning here to work and raise my kids. Telling you about my paintings will tell you about my life story in a certain way because my paintings are autobiographical, and I didn't set out to make them that way. Sort of a result of a practical situation, needed a model, and the self-portrait has become the focal point of my work, which something I resisted for many years until I finally just embraced it. And I now realize it is my way into a painting. So I want to tell stories in painting. Often the stories that have the most resonance are the same stories that human beings have been telling since the very beginning of language and art. Stories about journeys, about transformation, about growing up and growing old. Partly because I am a woman painting in the 21st century, I tell these stories in a new way. Oops. My painting, Portrait is the Birth of Venus, makes a sly comment in its title to Botticelli's iconic Birth of Venus. Thank you. It is only loosely based on that painting from art history. More, it is a reference to and departure from all of the Venuses in art history. Beautiful marble-like females who, though they may occupy the center of a painting, seem empty of human spirit. They are uninhabited bodies and faces that operate more as icons and symbols, platforms for the viewer's eye and imagination. The masterpieces of art history resonate with me as an artist, but as a woman, I miss a spark of life in these heroines. I am drawn to the female body, inhabiting one myself, But as a human being seeking meaning and connection, I often relate more to male protagonists in most of the stories and paintings made before women had the freedom to create. As for Venus, can I tell her story? Well, I have to. I do it by inserting a self-portrait. I look in the mirror and conjure up Venus with my own face and body. Using the reflected image of the woman I know best, wrought by this inner life that will impose itself, I make my Venus a self-portrait. I make the painting itself an autobiographical narrative. My Venus is necessarily an actor in this story. No one would make the mistake of calling her an object that is acted upon. She retains her outer persona, but I hope to imbue her with human life by painting her as myself, the human female body and face I see in the mirror and also inhabit. The experience of looking at the exterior from within is a perspective unique to the self-portrait. This has become the subject of my work, the collision between the interior and exterior self, the complex nature of the portrayal of such, and the possibilities of exploring narrative and meaning inherent in this process. Here's how I start a painting and what my studio looks like. I have a set with a mannequin, a mirror, a backdrop, and then I might use photo references. The two things happen at the same time. I start building a set, and it might start with simply a color idea or a piece of fabric that I like, or alternatively, it can start with a little story. I start building the set, and then I start making the painting. And then I go back, change the set, and then I change the painting. And those things go back and forth. And it might go over the course of a year or even two that the two things evolve together. And I don't even know exactly what the painting's about until I get into the process of making it. This is my most recent painting. And I worked on this painting for over a year before I knew what it was about. I kind of knew, but I wasn't really sure. And then I heard a poem on a podcast. The poem's called Flower Wars by Nico Amodar. And I don't like to put into precise words the meaning of my paintings, and that's why a poem is helpful for me as a way of getting at what I was trying to get at in the painting. And so this poem I heard, and I thought, this is something very much like what I'm trying to get at with this painting, and I didn't exactly know it. Poet's putting it into words, I'm putting it into paint, and there's a bit of a connection there. And then I kind of gave myself over to the poem, and I listened to it over and over in the studio while I was working. And I let it guide me, as well as this process of responding to the needs of the painting. And what I mean by that are the shapes and colors and the space and what I was trying to design on this flat surface. And the two things came together, and it's kind of opened up this whole new world of kind of the narrative and the formal aspects that I want to explore with a whole body of work going forward. So I'm grateful to this podcast for introducing me to this poem, which I've absolutely fell in love with. And it's a poem about the Aztec. It's kind of loosely about these flower wars that were enacted by the Aztecs to deal with catastrophe. And in fact, it's so absurd that they were creating these wars with flowers. We call them the flower wars, but they were sort of a made up war without a real enemy in order to appease the gods, when actually their real enemy was a famine or a plague. And so I think about how we contribute to our own destruction as humans, and have been since the beginning of time. And it seems relevant to our time right now, both on a personal level and on a kind of global scale. So I'd like to play the poem for you on this podcast that I heard it on, which is Poetry Unbound. All right, I'm gonna hit go on the
Flower Wars by Nico Amador. It started with a bang, some say a snap, then a watery isthmus, a primordial goo lipping along under a purple steam. Then pods shaped like violins, then fish wishing themselves bigger fins, feet, then pterodactyl, then mammoth, then ice and more ice, the long walk, the centuries in the wilderness, the zigzag wander, then a valley, then a lake, then the herd, the golden grain, a maze of aqueducts singing their blue song. then a city bigger than Rome, pyramids, a god some people called a hummingbird. A hummingbird cannot be a man, but man can learn to love a hummingbird, to go to war for a hummingbird. This bird was at war with the world, and it ate its enemies behind a curtain of roses. And the grasshoppers never said a word.
This is the other painting I have going in my studio at the same time. I usually work on several paintings at once, and they kind of speak to each other. So this painting I had been working on for a couple years, and I realized it was another Flower Wars sort of painting. And so I think the way that I am happiest in my studio is when I'm working, and then the painting kind of guides me to where it needs to go through the process of transforming it. So this painting, for example, there was a figure on the ground that eventually got completely obscured by the flowers and the dogs and the sort of landscape on the ground. And you can see in this slide right here. So this is a picture of my studio and how I set it up. I actually have another mannequin on the ground covered with flowers, which was going to be a person. And so back to the painting, that figure has actually disappeared. But I had to go to some lengths to get my dog to take that pose as well. But so it's usually a combination of a setup. I like to paint from observation, love to paint from observation, and yet I want to paint these things that I can't actually observe. So I have to add an element of invention. So I kind of go back and forth between observation and invention and try and bring it together in a way that is believable in the painting. So recently I started doing paintings that were getting away from this kind of mother and child theme that I've been working with for many years. I have 3 kids, ages 18, 14, and 6. And since my paintings tend to be autobiographical, the children end up coming into my paintings a lot. And if you've known me, my work before, you know that my children are in my paintings a lot, but I've been getting away from that. And I wanted to paint about a kind of a self-portrait in a different sort of a setting rather than the domestic one. And so I experimented with having a naked male on the ground who is not a particular individual, but is sort of an anonymous character, and have the female figure, on the contrary, be quite particular as a portrait. This is another recent painting that I worked on for several years, based on those Tudor portraits that incorporate some text and these kind of outrageous costumes that people are wearing to sort of show off their wealth and standing in society. And this is called Portrait with Cock and Socks, which I wrote in Latin on there. Now I'm going to show you a lot of paintings from the past few years that do kind of talk about the domestic life that I've been trying to incorporate with my artistic life for the last 18 years. So like I said, a lot of my paintings are based on something from art history. This one right here, this is a 15th century painting, Madonna of the Burning Bush. So this is my version of Madonna and the Burning Bush. And I've turned my burning bush into a geranium, which is like a domestic house plant. And I have this whole kind of circus swirling around her with the child who's trying to get her attention, and the figure who is kind of in her own world and a bit remote. And the unicorn in the background, that unicorn has popped up in my paintings a lot. I've always loved those Cluny tapestries of the unicorn. And those are just, nobody really knows exactly what they're about, but they seem to have something to do with, the unicorn lays its horn in the lap of a virgin. I mean, who knows what that's all about? But I feel like it's evocative in a way that I'm interested in. And so I've often tried to use the unicorn, added to the fact that when I was a kid, I drew unicorns and Pegasus incessantly. And that was my first artistic expression. So another thing that comes up a lot is childhood and innocence, but also play, and trying to kind of walk this line between something playful and also a little bit sinister. So, you know, 2 boys that I've had, they've been fascinated with snakes. They've gone out in the yard and grabbed them with their bare hands. And as a mother, you're sort of trying to navigate the danger of protecting these children from killing themselves, and also the innate curiosity of children, and something about motherhood in itself, which seems to walk that line between protection and being really in the midst of life. So then I was thinking about snakes, and I've also always been interested in women's association with nature, which is, there's a whole history with that. On the right, we have Caravaggio painting of the Virgin Mary helping the baby Jesus crush the head of the serpent. And on the left, we have Britney Spears dancing with a snake. So snakes keep coming into my paintings because they seem so, they're part of my life because of these boys that I have, and they're also part of art history. And so wait, this painting is called Mother and Child with Snakes and Ribbons. It's another painting with snakes. This is Self-Portrait is Gorgeous Feast. A lot of the paintings I've been doing involve having the figure kind of pinned down by her garments and weighted down a little bit by the both beauty and heaviness of the domestic life that she's in the center of. Food has come up in my paintings a lot. I think, again, circling back to my life as a mother, there's so much food preparation going on, and how that can be both really mundane and also the nourishment that you offer your babies, and weirdly important. And so I tried to make that almost a magical experience. And a lot of times I set up a painting. So I built this whole setup in my studio with the still life. And actually, if you see a cake down there in the bottom of the painting, that cake has been in about 10 of my paintings, and I've had it for about a decade, and I got it from King Soopers. I just recently threw it away. It's just an angel food cake. But I build these setups so I can paint from life as much as possible, and then invent the background with these cloth backdrops that can also turn into the landscape that I imagine.
Haley, we actually, before you move on to the next painting, there was a question about the bundt cake.
Oh yeah.
Someone was curious to hear more about the significance, and they've noticed that it's been around for a while.
Oh, okay. Well, cakes. I think that's really what I was getting at with food. And so there's this kind of the mundanity of motherhood and raising your children, and also the special, actually, what's funny is for a while I was a pent up artist who had to be a mother. And I channeled all my energy into cake decorating for a brief period because I couldn't get into the studio. And I made these incredible cakes. I just put all of my artistic effort into cake decorating. Actually, the cake itself was never that good because I'm not that great of a cook, but I would decorate the top of it just to the T. And so I feel like cakes, you know, you have your baby and then they have their first birthday, and the birthday cake is this important marker of that. And I think I've just been trying to get at how food is part of this domestic world, and it has this significance. And it's and then added to that, it's been in something people have been painting for, it's part of the still life tradition for centuries. So, and then there's also just the fact that if I build a still life, it's going to sit there for years in this case and not go anywhere. And I love to paint from life. So I think it's all that put together. And it's going to come up again because you'll see there's going to be another probably another cake coming up.
Someone
actually-
commented
Oh, go ahead.
about your arm placement in your painting. She said she's very struck by the placement of your arms and poison almost dance-like. And she's
Oh,
asking
okay.
you
Well,
to
let's talk
comment
about
on
arms.
it.
Well, for example, so the question about arms or gesture, and actually this painting by Chronic brings this up. So when I did this painting right here, portrait of Venus and the Honey Thief, I based it on this Chronic, Lucas Chronic, 15th century Germanic painter. I like how pre-photography, these bodies could be so weirdly distorted and not in classic kind of pinup pose or selfie pose. And yet we look at this and think she is beautiful, but she's actually so extremely distorted. And so when I did mine, I actually made the arms and legs strangely big. And I'm trying to play with, I want my paintings to be beautiful, but in no way do I want them to be beautiful in a like glamour model sort of a way. I'm trying to go beyond that. And so I wanted there to be a sort of awkwardness and a non-photo, non-model type look, which sometimes I know people object to. And I think people object to it now because we're surrounded by images of beautiful women in magazines, and we expect women to look a certain way. But if you go back to art history, they actually looked pretty weird and it was beautiful. So,
Somebody had a question about how long it takes you to paint these paintings.
So I usually, and I paint about 8 to 10 paintings a year, and I have them all going at once. So there's kind of a body of work that all speak to each other, that feed off of each other. And I mean, I will say I might work on one painting for a couple of years. So this painting, in fact, when I started it, this painting has a still life on the ground with the food elements and the figure, and also my own backyard. My field that I can see out of my window. And while I was painting it, the trees turned into autumn, and I changed the entire painting to get that yellow tree. And I'd been working on it for a year without that tree yellow. And all of a sudden the trees outside turned yellow, and I just changed the painting. So I like it that time is part of a painting. I like it that a painting is not a snapshot, a photo that might be like a split second, but it incorporates the passage of time and things that change. And I like it when I can just make a very big move on a painting and affect it dramatically, even though it is close to completion, and then it might go in a different direction. This is a very large painting. Some of these paintings, it's 72 inches high. This is a painting, it's based on this, which is a Tintoretto painting called The Origin of the Universe. So I like it that the origin of the universe, the Milky Way, the origin of the universe, I'm forgetting the title. But, I had a third child rather late in life, and rather as a surprise. I was done with painting about babies, but then I had this third child, and all of a sudden I was plunged back into baby world. My youngest son is 6 now, so I'm kind of coming out of it now, but it's pretty fresh. So I painted him 4 times. But, it's just was such a huge part of my life, milk and nourishment. This kind of goes back to the cake thing and feeding children. And then you discover this painting by Tintoretto, Zeus is forcing Athena to nurse this baby kind of against her will. And the milk is creating the stars in the galaxy, and it's the origin of the universe. I mean, wow. And then sometimes I do just a smaller self-portrait with less characters. This is Portrait with Margaret. We've always had guinea pigs at my house. In this painting, I am actually wearing a sweater that I'm wearing in that painting. I buy clothes to paint them, and then I think I've got to wear that sometime. I can't just paint it. But I bought this because I love the gold leaf pattern on the sweater. And this is called Portrait as Tooth Fairy. And I did a series of paintings about being a tooth fairy. And this one, I just wanted to make a fairly really a self-portrait with my own face, and not, I have another tooth fairy painting that I'll show you in a minute that goes in a different direction. But for a while there, boy, I had to be the tooth fairy constantly. And it's something about playing this role and kind of inhabiting this magical sphere for your children, as well as being their down-to-earth mom, that's sort of surprising and fun. This is one of my favorite paintings. I was living in Virginia when we had these pileated woodpeckers flying around, and I just couldn't believe them. Coming from Colorado, we don't have those birds. And at the same time, there was a New Yorker article about a possible sighting of the ivory-billed woodpecker, which I think they have now recently decided actually is extinct. But it's this gigantic woodpecker that used to live in North America. And so this is called darn it, I forgot the name of this painting. It's not this painting. The last, I forgot the name of it exactly, but it's the last testament of the ivory-billed woodpecker, or something like that. Sometimes I name my paintings after they're done, and I never do think of my paintings in terms of words. I think of them more as an image. And then I give a title to them, which I can take or leave usually. But I love it that this is this woman kind of floating around in a ball gown. And then at the bottom, there's these hellish sort of demons, which are actually the woodpeckers. And this was a phase when I was painting about women and animals before I had my third child. And I was starting to look at the association of women and nature and animals. And some of that has kind of a dark and scary past. I always like things that are a little bit frightening. So I have this woman in white surrounded by nocturnal animals. This painting is 72 inches high. I'm going to go through some of these a little bit quicker, and if anybody has any questions, and I'll get to some of the more recent ones, I'm just going to show you some of the paintings. I had a show here in Fort Collins at the Museum of Art, which was a lot of fun. They asked me to build a setup to replicate this kind of the setup that I build, that I paint from. So this is an example of that. And you can see that this is me rebuilding the setup that's similar to the painting in the background, the snake portrait with snakes and ribbons. Just like what you see in my studio, usually I build it, the mannequin. And this painting also, you can see the setup in the background. Again, I hang a cloth backdrop, build the mannequin with the clothing, make as much of it that I can possibly paint from life as I can. And then I use a photo reference for certain things that are not gonna hold still. Like for example, my son. So I did have him climb up on that chair and take that pose, took his picture, and then I try and incorporate him with the photo. And this is for when I teach painting, which I've started doing out of my studio recently after doing it for many years at different universities as an adjunct. I'm now going to do it from my studio, and I'm sort of enjoying that. It's a new venture for me. I like to teach it with a very limited palette. So I use a red, yellow, and blue palette. So the one on the right is a red, yellow, and blue primary palette. And that is all I use. One red, one yellow, one blue, and white. And I make this whole pretty involved palette every day when I start painting. And that helps me really get into this flow of painting. I go in there, as people ask, like, well, how do you get inspired? Inspiration is barely a factor. It is mostly just get in there and get to work. And one way I have found that I can get in there and get to work is I squeeze out my tubes of paint and I start mixing. So I just do this when I start in the morning. And then once I've done that, I can get into this flow state with the painting itself if I've got this palette set up. The one on the left is with a yellow ochre, so going a little bit more towards an earthy color at the beginning. But right now I'm using a red, yellow, and blue, more primary, and just mixing everything. And almost every painting you see that I've showed you has just those three colors. So when I teach painting, and if you can join me on one of my future classes, I will guide you through this process. This is going back to 2007 or 8, an earlier painting. Food, again, babies. This was based on a painting that I found called Portrait of a Lady Serving a Meal. It was a little Indian miniature of a woman with a bunch of food on the ground. And I have painted so many paintings on that theme. Another inspiration that keeps coming up for me is the Saint Casilde story. And these are Zurbaran, 17th century Spanish painter who has painted Saint Casilde. And the story is, it's a woman taking either food or money to some prisoners in her skirts. And when the pagan king surprises her and says, "What are you doing?" Well, the food or money is magically transformed into flowers. I love this story of a woman concealing something in her skirts. It's magically transformed into flowers. So I have done many versions of a Saint Casilde. This painting is, let's see, 2009. Woman holding something in her skirt. And then the idea of dress and how that has been, I think because part of being a self-portrait artist is you come up against the tension between the interior and the exterior right away. That's just inherent in the process. So clothing is obviously a factor. And looking at women's dress previously and now, that's something I'm very interested in. And so women took up 3 times as much space as a man and presented an imposing spectacle. I mean, look at what they were wearing. So I have fun building these dresses. These are old paintings, and I built dresses and painted them. Again. This is called Portraited Sunday Brunch. Cake again, food, clothing weighing her down. And then hair. I actually read a story about, it was at the beginning of vaccinations, and in order to try and convince the populace to get vaccinated, and I have to go back to the story to remember what it was, but it might have been, it wasn't Marie Antoinette, but it was around that time period. To convince the people to get vaccinated in France, she actually made some kind of a story in her hair. So they would use their hair as actual political propaganda. It always was hard to get people to get vaccinated. So I made some hairdos. I actually built these out of Spanish moss and still life arrangements. I like the idea of telling a story in your hair. Another issue for women is how to portray yourself as an artist. So in the 18th century, this is a self-portrait by a woman artist who had to show that she was not only doing a painting, but also taking care of the baby and looking beautiful at the same time. Don't worry, she's not getting too out of her role. She's got it. And these are some images I've gotten from various books and writings about different ways of portraying a story. So at the top, we have a Caravaggio, Judith and Holofernes, and Judith is kind of daintily sawing off the head of Holofernes with her old woman next to her. And on the right, we have Artemisia Gentileschi, the same scene. And I feel like those are pretty different portrayals of the same story, where the one on the right, that woman is laying into him. She's pushing on his head with her strong arm, and she is sawing off his head, and she's got the help of the other woman. She's going for it. Kind of different from the dainty sort of lovely lady on the left. And on the bottom, we have Rubens painting a woman in a hat, kind of coyly peeking at you with her bosom sort of exposed. And in the middle, Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun, self-portrait, more direct, less bosomy, just a subtle difference in the way a woman is portrayed. And then on the right, we've got this Minoan snake goddess and the classic pinup. Just looking at images of women and my own little take on the pinup snake goddess. These are self-portraits, Elizabeth Vigie Lebrun again on the left, and Paula Modersohn Becker on the right, painting herself pregnant, which is a very new thing. This is a painting I did when I was pregnant with my first son, who's now 18. And I mean, I wanted to paint my belly. Somebody bought this painting. I'm going to go a little bit faster through some of these older paintings. These are more paintings by the 17th century Spanish painter Zurbarán about martyred saints. And so the one on the top left, Saint Agatha, she has her breasts on a platter. That was the method of her martyrdom. She had her breasts slashed off, and so she's carrying them on a platter. And so this is when I had my first son, and I remember I would go into my studio and I might have an hour. I'd have him in his little car seat next to me. I'd try and hopefully he'd be happy so I could paint a little part of the painting. And I made this painting piece by piece with little snippets of time while I was raising him. And I put those little cupcakes on a platter as an homage to St. Agatha's breasts on the platter. I felt like, I was a nursing mom, and I felt like the world revolved around my breasts. This is based on a painting in Pasadena. I'm forgetting the name of that art museum. The Norton Simon collection. There's a beautiful painting out there, portrait as an allegory of fidelity, with a woman standing on her dog. Here's a few other art historical references in this too. Uh-oh. Why won't that go on? I'm going to go a little faster through some of these. This is the Tooth Fairy painting. Queen Elizabeth painting. And then I've looked a lot at Madonnas as paintings of women with babies, as I've had babies in my own life. This is my winter Madonna, my daughter. And this is an example of, in my studio at the moment, I build a setup when I teach a class, and I kind of guide people through an underpainting. So on the left, we paint the whole painting together just with an underpainting made up of the red, yellow, and blue that we'll use on our palette. And then on the right, you can see where I've started to add some color to it. And I purposely build a setup that is so complicated that people cannot focus on a little part of it, but they have to move around and look at relationships, which makes people a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm pretty convinced it's a good way to get people to paint relationships and not objects. At the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, I've always sort of wanted to paint other people, but the problem has been, how do I get models who are going to sit there for as long as I need them and also not bother me and also not impose themselves on my. And so the pandemic hit, and the tennis coach at Colorado State University was out of a job because tennis season had just been shut down, and he's a friend of mine. He said, "Haley, I'll come sit for you." And I said, "Okay, come sit for me." And so he came and sat, and this man had plenty of time to just sit for hours, and he'd talk and kind of keep me company, but I could tune him out a little bit and just focus on painting him. And this is the first time I'd ever had someone just give me as much time as I needed to make a painting. And I really enjoyed painting another person when there were no stakes involved. He didn't care a bit how I made him look, and he had plenty of time to just sit there. So this was one of my favorite paintings that I've done recently. And after I did that, I thought, well, I want to do my kids, but of course they wouldn't sit for very long, so I had to do their portraits from photos. That's my daughter and my son. This is just a commissioned portrait for a hotel in town. I used my children and some friends' children's. This is a little portrait of Temple Grandin that I was commissioned to do for another project in town at a hotel. And I really liked, I don't know if you know who Temple Grandin is, but she's our famous Fort Collins resident and a great advocate for autistic rights and also how to treat animals in a more humane way for slaughter. And her story was recognized in a film. But I showed up to do her painting, to take her portrait with a photo, and she stood there. She had dressed in her Western outfit, and she stood right by her door with all of her awards on the wall behind her. And I felt like, wow, this is a little Vermeer moment. I've got the light coming in from the left, and she's wearing this kind of blue cloth. It's a very small painting, and I didn't have very much time to finish it, so it's a quicker study, but it was a project I enjoyed. Just a portrait of a friend's daughter. So I'm showing you now a couple of commissioned portraits that I've done. I've kind of newly decided to do portraits for other people. And I found it strangely satisfying. So the thing that has come out of my recent life is an awareness that painting actually for other people can be rewarding, even though I've resisted it for so many years. And so I had to make my clients happy. She's also a friend of mine, so she was willing to give herself over to me in some way, but then I also had to make her happy. And so there was more of a collaborative effort, which is probably how the painters used to work back in the olden days when they would do commissioned work. They couldn't just do exactly what they wanted. So I found that to be actually strangely satisfying. And this is another commissioned portrait where she had strong feelings about what she wanted me to do, but she was also trusting me. So you got to find that balance. And these, again, this one's based on photographs that I took of the family. This is the last painting I'm going to show you. It's a very small painting. About a year ago, I was in a hotel in quarantine in Australia. I'd never been to Australia. I was there for 2 weeks in a hotel before I could set foot out of the hotel and explore this new country. And fortunately, there was a window looking out onto a park. And so at the same time every day, and I'd brought my painting equipment and this 8 by 10 inch canvas. So every day I just looked out and painted this park at the exact same time of day for 2 weeks. And sometimes experiences that you don't exactly plan on or expect do open up your work to new things that you wouldn't necessarily have done. I mean, I don't usually go out and paint a landscape from life, but I really enjoyed this process and I've done a few since then. So that's the end of that. Thank you. Do we have more questions?
Yeah, there's a few more.
Yeah, Haley, we have a couple questions. I have them queued up for you.
Okay. Wow.
So I can read them out. This one is kind of a multi-part question that says, and you can feel free to stop sharing your screen if you'd like, so we can see you.
Say that again. Do I share my?
If you want to stop, you can stop sharing your screen, or if you want to reference them through the questions, that's okay. But so this question says,
oh, stop share. Oh, got it. Okay. I see. Okay.
There you are. Nice and big. So this person said, these are beautiful and masterful paintings. As a painter and a mom of 3 who explores similar imagery myself, I have some logistical questions. How many hours a day are you in the studio? Are your self-portraits in the private homes of collectors as well as museums? Did surrendering to the self-portrait hinder private sales since they're so personal?
I mean, I think I remember it being a graduate student at Boston University, and one of my teachers there said, self-portraits don't sell. Well, unfortunately, I've never done anything for money. It's a bad thing to admit, but I'm not good at doing stuff for money. I'm actually trying to do a little bit more for money right now, but I've always just done what I want to do. And so, yes, I would say don't go into painting if you want to make money, and definitely don't go into painting self-portraits. On the other hand, painting self-portraits is really fun. So there are a few people out there, who do like to purchase strange autobiographical self-portraits by women artists. You just got to find them and they buy your work and put it on the wall. How many hours a day? I mean, my kids think this is what moms do. And then they go out in the world and they realize, oh, not all moms do that. Some of them are in the kitchen baking cookies, and they're here when they're cleaning my room for me. And I'm like, I'm not that mom. And I just have to say kudos to my kids for they now tell me they wouldn't have it any other way. There was probably a time when they thought, "Oh, I want a real mom," but now they went from thinking all moms do this, like take me into the studio with them and paint while I'm next to them and not really do the domestic thing very well, to thinking, I wish my mom was like that, to thinking, oh, I've got a cool mom. So it's, it's changes with the ages, and I just do the best I can, but everybody has finally agreed that mom needs to do that. We want mom to be happy. So how many hours a day? I mean, once they're in school, I'm in the studio.
Great. um,
Next, we see some of these questions on the side.
we do have some more. Yeah. So there's one that says, how do you deal with looking at your own face for so long? Or how would you describe your relationship to your appearance? And they said, thank you for the great talk and the work.
Yeah. So again, I think I've always wanted to paint people. I've wanted to paint faces. When I was in high school, I would just draw pictures of people like rock stars from pictures. I think something about the face has always been I just want to paint it. I wanted to draw the face. And so as an art student, couldn't hire a model, didn't have the money for that. Look in the mirror just simply to figure out how to draw a face. And then I guess I got so used to the fact that I am always there, always available, and will hold still for as many hours it takes. And I can keep kind of struggling with it. And I've gone back and forth, like I said, with having models. When I've hired a model, I can't quite put them into the story that I like. And I'm so free to do that with myself because I don't have nobody's in there with me. I can play any role I want. I can take that wherever I want. When I have a person in my studio, I do tend to paint them like they are. Well, I can play these roles. So I think that ended up being fun for me to make these wacko narratives using myself. And as for using my face, I still can't get it right. So I think people feel like, well, you must know your face and you can just do it. I'm like, no, I've actually never felt like I've actually succeeded. I think, gosh darn it, I'm going to get it this time, because I've never quite gotten it right. And I think probably painters feel like that about whatever they paint. It's just an unending problem. It's just impossible. Painting is impossible, whatever it is. And so you keep trying to get it right. It's like the one I'm working on right now, I'm going to get it. And then it's over and you move on, and it's the next one that's going to hopefully succeed.
There's a quick question. Have you ever made a book of your work, or do you plan to?
I haven't really made a book of my work. I hope somebody makes a book about my work for me. I've sometimes been in publications, but never all of it. And I think as I'm getting a little older now, and even when I do these talks now, it's like I add more recent paintings onto the end of the talk that I was giving 10 years ago, and I keep adding, and then I try and chop some out, but it's like, wow, there's a lot of paintings there. I mean, I've been doing this for some years, and been doing it. I'm doing it for a while.
Maybe someday. We all hope. Here is another one. So, do you decide which objects to stage versus invent from only your head? Meaning, do you decide which objects you're going to observe, or the ones that you're going to paint from memory? I think.
I mean, I think like I said, I like to paint from life. So I do have as much as I can set up in the studio. It's like I'm a still life painter, basically. But then there's these elements that I want to get in my painting, like certain animals or landscapes, or so I think what I'm doing right now is I'm actually building forms out of cloth that I know that I can then turn into, like actually in the painting. Can you see behind me? I've got actually the painting that I've been working on. I made a cloth arrangement out of this kind of waterfall thing, and then I'm turning it into this waterfall. So it's like, I don't think I can do it unless I have something to look at. I don't actually paint from my head. I'm really bad at that. I can't do that. I have to have some sort of reference, and preferably it's some stuff I can paint. So I have a huge collection. I mean, I have a lot of junk that I have to keep. And I'll go in my studio and think, I know what I need. I'll see it. When I see it, I'll know it. But I think the cake thing is a good example. I kept thinking that cake's perfect. I know I've painted it 10 times, but it's just the perfect thing. And so a lot of the similar object, and I've kind of let myself go with that, thinking there must be there's something about that seems right. And so some of these things are intuitive, like that's the right shape, that's the right object that has some kind of narrative evocation that is going to be right for this particular scene or take it where it needs to go. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's kind of, and then it also, there'll be a color thing, like, gosh, I love the color. I love this color relationship. And those two things go back and forth. And that's, hopefully those two things come together and make the content or the subject have some sort of meaning. And a lot of times, sometimes it just flat out doesn't work. And those paintings will get turned against the wall, or they'll be out in the world and I'll think later that really didn't work. Sometimes they come together and they both have they work as this kind of painting, and the narrative part is supported by that. And then they speak to me and I understand, oh, I know what I was trying to do there, and it's telling me, and hopefully it's speaking to other people in that way. It's kind of like hit or miss trying to get that to come together. There's a lot more questions.
Yeah, there's a couple more questions I want to get to before we end, but I'll just note that Adil said that they would love to be able to look at your painting and meditate with them, and they hope that you do publish a book with your historical references so that we can all have
kind of fun to
study.
see, like the historical references, like
Really
what I'm
fun.
looking at. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm watching the clock. I know we're just about at 7, so people can hang out. I think these are great questions to hear answers to. So do you actually paint your face from a mirror, or do you supplement with photos, arms and legs too? And your studio has lots of natural light. For your still lives, are you anchored to using natural light?
I do have a fabulous studio. That's why I'm out in Colorado, partly because I've got this amazing studio, and I almost always paint with natural light. Sometimes I shine a light as well to make it kind of a backlit fun experience. But I have this amazing studio here. I have I've got this giant garage door thingy that I could open. I actually have 2 rooms. This is one of the rooms. And so I love to paint natural light, and I do try but then at night I want to paint. There's usually something I can do. As for painting, I usually paint my face in the mirror. Now, good question about the hands. Since this comes up as a self-portrait painter. Are you going to paint yourself painting, or are you going to paint yourself doing something else, which is kind of a little bit of a lie in the middle of the painting, which I love it when paintings lie. So I use photo references. I don't like painting from a photo. That's the part that's boring for me. I mean, I do it because I want to get this right. But as much as possible, I have a full length mirror, and I set it up. So I think in one of in the slides, you could see how I have a whole backdrop. Actually, I have it in the studio over here. Do you see over here in the corner? You can see this backdrop thing I have, and I set this up behind the mirror with different cloth, so I can make the backdrop. This is one of my backdrops. I hang it, and I have so many different pieces of cloth. I change this color so I can turn it into the background that I want, whether it's sky or some kind of a landscape. And then I can paint myself in the full-length mirror, and I can look at the relationship of the face to the background, because otherwise I wouldn't know how to do it. Yeah.
Okay, let's get to these other questions. So someone said the cock and socks painting stands out to me as especially modern. Do you see that, and do you like it in comparison to your more complex paintings?
Yeah.
Visually complex, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think sometimes I don't want my paintings to, like, I've never, for some reason, really wanted to paint blue jeans, or I like the clothing to look sort of timeless. But I've wondered a little bit if my paintings look old fashioned, which I don't really want. I just want them to seem timeless. And the cock and socks one, to be honest, that painting, she was full on nude for about a year before I put a red sweater and a tutu around her neck. So it was another example of a painting that changed a lot over the course of it. And I did think, I want this to look like a contemporary painting of, you know, contemporary dress or undress, because I'm a little bothered by these sort of romantic clothing choices that I'm making. And I will say a lot of times the clothing that I dress the model in, or the mannequin in, is it could be a piece of cloth that I just pinned to her to kind of build a dress, build clothing. So that's a thing I think about, and I'm happy to hear the feedback, because I want my paintings to feel contemporary without looking a particular decade. So I'm still not sure how to handle that. Someone who says, do you use your dreams for source material? I want to respond to that one, because oh, somebody's mentioning Paul Arago. Yes, love that painter. I do think, without using exact dreams, I do think that there's these moments when I can tap into, there's this kind of a subconscious, instinctive side of making art that is important. And I can also get into a state like that. Like when I used to be a runner, I would go for a run and I would just think about paintings while I was running. So something about the act of not having to think about anything else and be very in the moment and imagine my paintings. And I know when I'm happiest in my life, I'm falling asleep at night, thinking about my paintings and kind of imagining them. So it's not actually in the dream state, although I wouldn't be surprised if thinking about painting right before I fall asleep, when I'm relaxed and calm and happy and don't have problems in my life that I'm dealing with that are intruding, I think that then I can have these dreams. And actually I did have a dream about a grasshopper, this beautiful grasshopper that I can still see in my head, and I want it to get in a painting somehow. And I know it was because I was listening to that poem that talks about grasshoppers. So I think that goes back to when I'm actually in this kind of great flow state in painting, which doesn't happen most of the time. Most of the time I have to say it is just work and I can't get it. But there are a few moments where I'm just wholly immersed and I'm responding to what's going on in the painting and completely taken by it. I think that underlying stuff I've thought about before and given myself over to comes in, if that makes sense. Anything else?
There's a couple more questions.
Yeah, so there's some quick questions. How much time do you spend looking at other contemporary artists' work? You can answer that now if you want, but there's also one that came direct to me. Someone was just curious if you were working with fake flowers and fruit in your studio.
Fake flowers and fruit. Yeah, I've got a lot of fake flowers and fruit, but I have also built setups from real food, real fish, real lobsters, real flowers. And there's something fun about painting things that are changing and dying. Something about, and this is also true of painting landscape. There's this, and also painting from a real model. There's this urgency that this is going to change and I've got to get it now. And I actually think there's something fun and helpful about that as well. And I'm kind of cheating by using all these fake things that can stay there. I mean, it can sit there for 2 years. I've had setups in my studio, 2 years it's been sitting there, and because it's fake flowers. So I like to mix that up with real stuff too. And it's also really more beautiful, the real things.
I think that kind of starts to answer this, and maybe there's more to say, maybe there's not, but someone did ask, could you talk more about why painting from photos is boring to you or not as exciting as painting from life, which you kind of just touched on, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, the photo is already a flat thing. It's already like time is not involved. It's a split second. It's flat. The color's not. The real world that you're you're inside the world, and there's air and light and space. It's constantly changing. You've got two eyes. You actually are seeing two different viewpoints of the same thing. A photo takes all that out. So it's my job as the artist to take this kind of photo that's stripped out all the exciting stuff and make it more exciting. But that I can only do that because I mostly paint from life and have to grapple with the complexity of the three-dimensional world that I am trying to make two-dimensional rather than this two-dimensional thing that I'm just transferring. So I use photos absolutely as little as possible for that reason.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think the last question we will touch on, it's a fun one. Someone's curious about what kind of podcasts you like to listen in the studio. What are your recommendations that we can put in our ears next time we go to work?
That's a big one because I've listened to so
I
many.
know.
Oh geez, I don't even know which one to tell you.
Just rattle them off. We can.
Well, I listened to the S-Town by Serial, and so I'm listening to their current the current one. I listened to I listened to some news stuff. I went for a period of no news allowed during a certain presidential period. And then I came back to the news. And so I put a little bit of news in, but I want somebody to talk about. Hang on, I'm gonna give you I just don't even know where to start with this. I've been listening to Hidden Brain. I've been listening to Freakonomics Radio. I listen to books on tape. Actually, this is the best. Books on tape, because you can read books that seem daunting in the book form. You just say, press go on the book on tape and get a great reader. And before you know it, you are drawn into something like Faulkner. Before you even knew it, you are drawn into Faulkner, and it's just going. And then I kind of go back and forth and read it in print at night for bed, and then I listen to the reader during the day, and that's a very rich experience. But I mean, I listen to a lot of stuff while I'm working, and I have the luxury of being somebody who can work. Sometimes it's music, though. I have to say, there are times when it's got to just be music.
Yeah. Well, maybe if you want to know more about how Haley works, you can check out her workshop and study with her and get into that frame of mind together. This is a great time to talk about it. We'll close out. The workshop is going to be online, so you can take it from anywhere if you're interested. And it's in April. The dates are escaping me because we just rescheduled, but it's on our website, so you can go to concordart.org. Yeah.
And
yeah, you can go to concordart.org. You can learn more. You can register if you like, and I can't recommend it enough. I think it's going to be a great weekend to be together. So thank you guys. Thank you again so much for being here with us. Thank you to Haley and to your helper, Abdulaziz, for helping everything run smoothly tonight. It's been really fabulous. We're so happy that you joined us and to have you for a workshop this spring.
Let me just say, I saw a few names and faces of people that I haven't seen in so many years that I'm so happy to see. Lori, you come to mind. Matt, a few others. Thank you very much for being there. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, I hope you have warm and comfortable evenings, and we will see you next time. We do have a talk coming up that I'll plug really quick with Matt Brown in 2 weeks. And next week, we open MJ2 in person at Concord Art. So grab a mask and come see us. We'll be there. No food or drink. We're keeping it simple. So come see us then at 5:30 p.m. And that's it for tonight. Good night, everyone. Thanks, Haley. Have a good night.
Thank you.